So, Motor Torpedo Boat Squadrons of World War II. In April 1940, the U.S. Navy designed the idea of PT boat squadrons. Squadrons would have 12 boats each with its own commanding officer, the boat captain, called officer in charge, and the boat's crews would move from boat to boat depending on the availability of the captains and the crews. There was a total of 691 PT boats built between December of 41 and October of 45. 531 were commissioned into the U.S. Navy. It was a total of 45 squadrons, but only squadrons 1 through 40 actually saw wartime deployment. They had a design contest of Manhattan looking for designs to be used. And after the initial testing, a number of designs, they chose the Elko Naval Division and Higgins Industry to build most of the boats. And here you have a photo of the experimental PT boat number 8 out of the Philadelphia Navy Yard. PT boats 1 through PT 9 were experimental, replaced with the Elko 77-foot boat. PT 3 and PT 8 are now in the National World War II Museum. PT 4 through 7 and PT 9 were actually transferred to the British, and they used them, obviously. Squadron 1 became PTs 20 through 30 and 42. The squadron was at Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 41. Boats 20 and 25 were at Dock S-13 in the magazine lock at the Pearl Harbor subbase. And another 6 boats were ready to be loaded onto the USS Ramapo, and they were supposed to be taken to the naval base in the Philippines. The 12 boats that were not already loaded fired over 4,000 rounds and are credited with multiple downed planes. With the fall of the Philippines to Japan, obviously the transfer to the naval base in the Philippines never happened. MTB Ron 1 also participated in the Battle of Midway, where PTs 21 and 22 are credited with shooting down an A6M0 fighter plane. And here we have David's first page, Lieutenant Robert Nelson of Motor Torpedo Squadron 1. Dated in 45 and passed by naval censor. Here we have PT 14, which was transferred to the British, which is why you see that actually the British, and then it went to Canada, which is why David had the flags on that. We get into lost the top of my sheet, so sorry. Motor Torpedo Squadron 2. With only 3 boats, MTB Ron 2 was the smallest squadron. It ended up being moved into other squadrons later, but it was assigned to the Office of Strategic Services. The squadron had the run of a ferry boat. It was in the English side, so it was running enemy-occupied convoys, basically, delivering secret agents, saboteurs, spies, resistance officers, and couriers to the governments in exile. In early 44, under Lieutenant Commander John D. Bulkeley, whose name you will see often, they were sent to collect sand from the Normandy beaches. There were several different British scientists who insisted that the beaches in Normandy were all of the spongy peat with only a thin layer of sand over top of it, and that the equipment would bog down. So they were sent to collect sand to disprove this. And here you have PT 199 delivering survivors from the quarry to the USS Fitch off of Utah Beach. And here we have Ensign L.C. Norton from MD Squadron 2. And the Squadron 3 The undeniable triumph of Motor Torpedo Squadron 3 was the flight of General MacArthur. On March 11th, 1942, at Corregidor, the 4 surviving boats of the squadron picked up the general, his staff selected officers and technicians, the general's wife, his 4-year-old son, and the son's Chinese nurse. In a series of night dashes from island to island through 600 nautical miles of Japanese-infested waters, the squadron carried the escaping brass to the island of Mindanao, where they were picked up by a B-17 Flying Fortress bomber flight to Australia. They only lost 1 boat and no people while they were doing this. And there you have MTB Squadron 3 aboard the deck of the USS Guadalupe while they were bound for the Philippines. And here's a yeoman's cover from Squadron 3. And here's what I just got from our auction. This is Vice Admiral John Bulkeley's autograph on a cover where they're talking about how he evacuated MacArthur off of Corregidor. And he actually ended up being on both sides. He was not only in the Pacific, but he was in the Atlantic for D-Day. So when you see him on Squadron 1 talking about the sands, that's actually after this. And you'll see that, I think if you do any research on it, you'll see it's often, these guys were moved around a lot. Somebody would be in, and even the boats moved around a lot from one squadron to the next as ships were sunk or scuttled for whatever reason. Squadrons would be broken up and then sent into other squadrons. So you have a lot of movement between both the ships and the personnel. Squadron 4 was actually the training squadron in Melville. It was founded in February of 1942, and the training started in March. 51 officers, 177 enlisted men. They started with 10 boats, PTs 59 through 68. Overall, they used 47 different PT boats for training. Cute story. 1942, PT-59 launched a torpedo in air. It traveled 7 miles and hit a cargo ship, the USS Capella, off of Jamestown, Rhode Island. 8 sailors were injured, no deaths were reported, and it didn't say whether or not anybody was court-martialed for the error. And here we have penalty cover from Motor Torpedo Boat Squadron 4. And if you're wondering, these are the insignias. Each squadron had its own little different patch. And while we only gave, the Navy gave numbers, each boat actually was given different names according to who was on it at the time. If it was in one squadron, it had a name, but if it was switched to another squadron, they might have given it another name. So you have several of that going on also. Here's another cover, Sailor Mail, February of 44. Motor Torpedo Boat Squadron 5 was stationed at Panama and then the PT boat base at Emerald Island in Papua New Guinea. In June of 44, during the refueling of PT-63 and 107, a defective fuel valve leaked gas onto the sea, and when 107 started its engines, a spark ignited the fuel, causing a fire. Within an hour, PT-63, 107, and the refueling dock were all in flames and destroyed. And Sailor Mail from Squadron 5. Squadron 6 arrived in the South Pacific in time for its boats to participate in some of the last actions in what's called the Torpedo Express at Guadalcanal. The Tokyo Express is the name given by the Allied forces to the use of Imperial Japanese Navy ships at night to deliver personnel, supplies, and equipment to the Japanese forces in and around New Guinea and the Solomon Islands. Here we have PT-122 sank the Japanese submarine I-22 on November 12, 1942, off the mouth of the Musi River in New Guinea. It is the only PT boat to have credit for sinking a submarine. Here we have penalty. Here we have PT-117. It's around 1943 in the Solomons. It was destroyed by aircraft. And above it is a sailor mail from Squadron 6. Motor Torpedo Boat Squadron 7 saw action in the Southwest Pacific. In the pre-dawn hours of October 25th, 1944, during the Battle of Surigao Straits, PT-137, under Lieutenant Junior Grade I.M. Kovar, crept up on a Japanese destroyer stationed at the rear of the enemy column. He shot his last torpedo, which ran deep, missed the destroyer completely, but hit the cruiser Abukuma. The explosion killed 30 sailors, destroyed the radio shack, and slowed the cruiser to 10 knots. The Abukuma was sunk by Army bombers the next day. And down below, you have a map that's from the book, The Mosquito Fleet. And it shows, I've got a bigger arrow there, where the Akuma was sunk. And here we have sailor mail from MTB Ron 7, along with, again, you see photos and its insignia. This is one of the rarer covers because it actually has not just Squadron 7 on it, but it does say there it is from PT-129. Getting ones with the actual PT boat numbers individually are very hard to find. Squadron 8. In March of 43, Lieutenants Junior Class Skipper Dean in PT-114 and Francis McAdoo in PT-129 set up an ambush in a known Japanese barge rendezvous in Maunama Bay, a tiny inlet on the Huon Gulf shoreline. 114 dropped anchor, 129 oozed back into the Gulf. They didn't know 6 Japanese barges had already arrived before them and were unloading. Too close for their 50 caliber mounts, they used submachine guns. With guns blazing, they hosed down the deck of the 2 Daihatsu and cut their anchor. The bow of the 114 got caught on one of the barges, and Dean solved the problem by shoving the throttles full up and riding over the barge, which sank under it. PT-129 came running back in, and both PTs sank all of the barges. And here we have sailor mail from Squadron 8. And another one, and it actually says that it's from PT-66. Again, those are hard to find. Here we have PT-142, known as the Flying Shamrock, and PT-152 went after 3 barges. 1 sank in the first attack, but the other 2 were still afloat after the 3rd run. PT-152 dropped depth charges, which did nothing. 142 tried the same and sank a 2nd barge. Lieutenant John Bulkeley, of Corregidor fame, in command of the operation aboard 142, called for a boarding party, and they swarmed the barge and sank it. And here you have another PT-143. The most successful operation of Motor Torpedo Boat Squadron 9 was at dawn on May 27, 1944, when Lieutenant Monahan led 9 PTs covered by 8 RAAF Kitty Hawk fighters and 4 Navy Mariner bombers into the harbor at Sandakan on the east coast of Borneo. The PTs included 126, 154, and 155. The PTs ran at 35 knots through a narrow harbor entrance, laying smoke as a protection against the enemy fortifications. And for 2.5 hours, the PT boats sank small craft, destroyed piers, set fire to warehouses. Only minor wounds to the sailors were reported, but they did a lot of damage. And then here we have a photo of PT-155. Here's sailor mail from Squadron 9. Squadron 10 was the first of the Solomon Island squadrons transferred to New Guinea, where it joined Squadron 24. Heavy barge traffic made Sandow a productive operating point. The strongly defended coastline made it a dangerous one. The PT boat crews drew shore fire at least 64 times between March and May of 44. And here we have a photo of Squadron 10 nestled alongside its tender, the USS Pontus. Sailor mail from Squadron 10. Squadron 11, the Lieutenant Commander Leroy Taylor wrote a brief history of his unit called "Too Many Months in the Solomon Islands or Sex Takes a Holiday." The quote at the beginning is, "This is about a squadron of MTBs. There are no heroes in this group. No melodramatic book has been written about them. They did their jobs as they saw it, and at the same time tried to keep from going nuts by not letting it get to them." So here's a picture where they beached what was left of Squadron 11 at Samar, Philippines, just as they were being stripped, and then they were burnt on the shore. And here we have sailor mail from Squadron 11. Sailor mail from 11. TB Ron 12 was nicknamed the Millionaire Squadron because a large number of its skippers were among America's wealthiest young men. They had graduated from Ivy League universities, and they celebrated MTB 12's commissioning dinner at the New York Yacht Club. It included Lieutenant Alfred Gwynn Vanderbilt, who had inherited millions of his family's railroad fortune when he turned 21. Lieutenant Vanderbilt, the skipper of 196, earned a Silver Star, and the squadron itself earned a Presidential Unit Citation. And here you have a picture of PT-196, the last of the original contract boats. It had a series of light gray stripes and a shark's face on it, and it was nicknamed the Elcopus. By the way, Squadron 12 did not have John F. Kennedy in it. Here we have PT-195 from Squadron 12. Squadron 13. On December 12th, 1944, the MTB Squadrons 13 and 16 left Leyte Gulf on a convoy with the 8th Army's Visayan Task Force to invade Mindanao. Mindoro Bay. On December 17th, 1944, 8 Japanese planes attacked the ships in Mangarin Bay at Mindoro. PT-77 was attacked by one. The ship said to still held steady its course, and just before impact, it cut its throttles, and the kamikaze pilot flew over and crashed into the sea only 10 yards ahead of the boat. And sailor mail from Squadron 13. Squadron 14 was assigned to the Panama Sea frontier and saw no enemy action. PTs 98 through 102 were among the last PTs built by the Huckins Yacht Company in Jacksonville, Florida. And here we have a picture of 101 during sea trials. And I have never seen a cover from Motor Torpedo Boat Squadron 14. The first of the American MTB squadrons in the European theater, Squadron 15 was enlarged by an additional 6 boats. In January of 1944, PT-201 was ferrying General Clark to Anzio when minesweeper USS Sway missed seeing the emergency recognition flare fired by the PT boat, and Sway hit the boat in the chart house, wounding both the CO and the XO, and killing an officer who was and a sailor. Sorry. Having penalty cover from Squadron 15. '44, just before D-Day.
Recording in progress.
On July 10th, 1943, Commander Hunter R. Robinson in PT-213 led a flotilla of 10 Air Force crash boats to Cape Granatola at the far western tip of Sicily, as far as it could get from the actual landing beaches around the southern horn of the island. The crash boats and the PTs were supposed to charge around offshore in the early hours of the landing day, sending out phony radio messages, firing rockets, playing phonograph records of rattling chains and the clanking noises of landing craft engines. And here you have a war ballad, sailor mail from Squadron 15. Squadron 16 was at Mindanao on December 15th, just after 8 a.m. Kamikazes attacked it. 3 planes attacked destroyers, but a 4th flew over the stern of Ensign Rafferty's PT-221, caught the full blast of the PT battery, and it cartwheeled along the surface of the bay, spraying water and flames until it finally sank from sight. MTB Run 16 was awarded the Naval Unit Commendation for action on Mindoro, December 15th through 19th, 1944. And here we have sailor mail from MTB Squadron 16. And this is specifically PT-223. The night of December 26, 1944, HMJS Kiyoshima, damaged by U.S. Army bombers, was sunk when Lieutenant Junior Grade Harry Griffin Jr. in PT-223 closed to within 4,000 yards and fired both starboard torpedoes. 3 minutes later, a long lance of flame shot up from the ship's side and she went under. They are credited with the sinking of the ship. Mail with their little stamp, the mosquito fleets. You'll see those on various covers throughout squadron covers. PT-224. Squadron 17. On the night of January 31st, 1944, PT-77 and 79 of MTB Ron 13 were sunk by friendly fire. The 30 sailors swam together to an enemy-held shore 2 miles away. They were sheltered by guerrillas until February 3rd, when they were picked up by PTs 227 and 230 of MTB Ron 17. The Mindoro PTs, as part of Task Force 70-1.4, were awarded a naval unit commendation that read, "As the only naval force present after the retirement of the invasion convoy, this task unit served as a major obstruction to enemy counter landings from nearby Luzon, Panay, and Palawan, and bore the brunt of concentrated hostile air attacks through a 5-day period, providing the only aircraft protection available for persons ashore. Anti-aircraft protection for persons ashore. The gallant officers and men maintained a vigilant watch by night and stood out in the open waters close to base by day to fight off repeated Japanese bombings, strafings, and suicide attacks, expending in 3 days the ammunition that was expected to last approximately 3 weeks in the destruction or damaging of a large percentage of attacking planes." And here we have a sailor mail from Squadron 17. Motor Torpedo Boat Squadron 18 was the first Cavalry Division landings on the Admiralty Islands were on February 29, 1944. Faulty reconnaissance from the air said that the island was free of Japanese when there were actually 4,000 on the island. The Japanese counterattacked the smaller Allied forces. The only Navy fire support came from destroyers and PT boats from Squadrons 18 and 21. PT also worked as running errands, carrying wounded, towing stranded boats off the beach, and even carrying cavalry generals on scouting missions. And here you have PT-367 with a very odd paint job. Sailor mail from MTB Ron 18. Squadron 19, commissioned in April 22nd, 1943, was sent to the South Pacific. The squadron saw action at Bella La Bella, Treasury, and Green Islands. In April of 44, the Bougainville MTB base in the Solomon Islands was closed. Squadron 19 was decommissioned in May, and its remaining ships were then divided between Squadrons 20 and 23. Sailor mail from MTB 119. Night of February 25th and 26th, 1944, Lieutenant Jonathan S. Raymond of the XO of Squadron 20 took PTs 251 and 252 to Gazelle Harbor. Early in the evening, they sighted a barge running close to the shore and sank it after two firing runs. Later, while attacking a barge in Empress Augusta Bay, PT-251 ran onto a reef. PT-252 hit the same reef but managed to back off it. 247 and 277 arrived at 0445, asking the base to send air cover so they could pull PT-251 off the reef. Before air support could survive, a shore gun started firing. The third round was a direct hit, and the PT-251 exploded. There were only 3 survivors. 2 officers and 11 men were killed. And sailor mail from MTB Ron 20. Motor Torpedo Boat Squadron 21. On the afternoon of December 10th, 1944, while in Lady Gulf, PT 323 and 327 were underway for patrol station with two additional PTs from Squadron 36 following about 200 yards astern. When four planes attacked them, one plane made a kamikaze attack and hit PT 323 amidships, killing both the CO and the XO. 11 other crew members were wounded, including two U.S. Army passengers that were aboard. PT 323 is considered to be the first PT boat sunk by kamikazes. And down below you have a picture of it where it shows that it was cut in half here. We have sailor mail from Motor Torpedo Boat Squadron 21. Squadron 22 was commissioned in November of 43, operated under the British Coastal Forces. They saw action along the northwest coast of Italy and the southern coast of France. They participated in the invasion of Elba on June 18, 1944, where PT 305 sank a German flak lighter. Then in August of 44, MTB Ron 22 participated in Operation Dragoon, the invasion of southern France, where they landed French commandos on the coast of France in preparation of the invasion. In April of 45, PT 305 sank an Italian MAS boat, which was the version of itself, a fast torpedo boat. Here we have a cover from MTB Ron 22. MTB Boat Squadrons 23 en route from Cape Toronkina to patrol station off the Bulls Coast on the night of February 11th through 12th, 1944, with zero visibility because of a rain squall. PT 282 rammed into PT 279 in the engine room. Jack Castleberry, machinist third class, was hurled overboard from PT 232, as was Paul Spitzer from PT 279. The boat captain of the 282 dived in after Castleberry and rescued him. Spitzer was never found. PT 279 sank, and PT 282, heavily damaged in the bow, was towed to base stern first. Down below is a picture of their commissioning ceremony. And here we have a sailor mail cover from Motor Torpedo Boat Squadron 23. Another one. May 14th, 1945, PT 335 and PT 343 destroyed a cargo barge and launched on the beach at Piso Point. The PTs approached a little cove behind Piso Point, but did not enter because of shoal water at the entrance. Not seeing anything through binoculars, they continued their patrol to the north. Just before noon, a Mitchell bomber reported it had seen two enemy PTs hidden in the mangroves at Piso Point. So the two PTs returned and searched out a deep, narrow channel leading through the shoals into the cove. There they found 6 Japanese PT boats tucked away under the mangoes, cleverly hidden under nets of fresh-cut brush and palm leaves. And soon after the boats opened fire, they shot away the camouflage from one enemy PT, and a moment later they exploded its gasoline tanks with the 40 millimeter hits. After 3 hours, Mitchell bombers arrived, and the 2 PT boats withdrew and directed the planes to the targets to finish sinking them. And here we have Squadron 24, sailor mail again. Sailor mail from 24. Boat Squadron 25. On March 27th, 1944, Lieutenant C.C. Hall, the XO of MTB Ron 25, he was in PT 353, with PT 121 of MTB Ron 8, were trying to investigate a reported enemy schooner north of New Britain in Papua New Guinea. At 0745, four P-40s of the 78th Squadron RAAF flew over, and Hall asked them by radio to investigate the schooner. The planes reported it had been strafed earlier and was not a worthwhile target. No sooner had the ships turned to leave when they were attacked by four other P-40s from the 78th Squadron and a Beaufighter of the 30th Squadron, Royal Australian Air Force. The message reporting the intended movements of the PTs was placed in the wrong file at 78th Squadron headquarters. The resulting failure of communication was that 4 officers and 4 enlisted men were dead, 4 officers and 8 enlisted men were wounded, and both PT boats were destroyed. Here we have sailor mail from Squadron 25. MTB Ron 26 was assigned to the Hawaiian Sea frontier and saw no action against the Japanese forces. PTs 255 through 264 were the last PTs built by the Huckins Yacht Company in Jacksonville, Florida. Neither squadrons of the 78-foot Huckins PT boat saw action against U.S. enemies. Squadron 26 was the defense force of Midway Islands, along with an old 4-stacker destroyer. On ready boat duty day and day out, the squadron's primary mission at that point was to pick up downed flyers. Sailor mail from Squadron 26, and you can see over here again, you've got those the emblem of the mosquito fleet on the cover. Motor Torpedo Boat 27. On February 7th, 1945, MTB Ron 21 and 27 were the first ships to enter Manila Bay since the surrender of Corregidor in May of 42. February 16th, 45 saw 2,000 paratroopers drop on Corregidor. Some missed the top of the rock and ended up on the cliffs. PT 376 moved in and 50 yards from shore put off a rubber raft over the side. The XO, Lieutenant Raymond Schaefer, and Lieutenant Junior Grade Charles Adams paddled ashore and picked up the stranded men. They then returned for another group. They rescued 17 paratroopers while under enemy sniper fire. And there is actually a photo of them going towards the beach to pick up men. Here we have 27, and a famous picture of MacArthur and the Philippines president returning to Corregidor on PT 373. And another sailor mail from MTB Ron 27. Here we have Squadron 28. On February 1st, 1945, Lieutenant Commander Frank Gass led Lieutenant Junior Grade E.H. Olson in PT 551 and Lieutenant Walter Brown in PT 547 on a strike at the San Fernando area in the Philippines. The boat sank or destroyed 21 barges and 5 suicide boats, holed a water tower with several 40-millimeter hits, and started a huge fire near the tower. PT 551 and 379 on March 17, 1945, had a mission to pick up 12 crew members and passengers from a Navy PBM in the sea so heavy the boats were considerably damaged and every crew member Officers and men suffered minor injuries while on the mission. And here we have a photo that just says it's identified as somewhere in the South Pacific. Mail from Motor Torpedo Boat Squadron 28. MTB Ron 29 was assigned to the Mediterranean and based out of Calvi, Corsica, and Leghorn, Italy. On the night of June 14th and 15th, 1944, Lieutenant Bruce Van Buskirk in PT 558 with PTs 552 and 559 made a nearly perfect attack on two German corvettes between La Spezia and Genoa. TA-26 and TA-30 were confirmed sunk. Daily Mail from Motor Torpedo Boat Squadron 29. MTB Ron 30 arrived in the English Channel on June 7th, 1944, and joined Operation Neptune on June 10th. The average of 29 PT boats from 3 MTB Rons remained patrolling between the Mason Line and the Portland Ace. You can see I've got that labeled here, sort of this little red line that shows you where the Portland base was and where they worked. Squadron 30 remained in Cherbourg during the winter and spring of 45. They had a number of missions rescuing survivors of torpedoed ships. Here we have Sailor Mail from Squadron 30. The specific PT boat 457, and along with 459, they claimed to have attacked and sunk 2 small enemy landing craft off Cap La Hage in Normandy on the night of February 27, 28, 1945. To nowhere where that was actually confirmed. And since everything says they claimed, I don't know that anybody ever confirmed that. Squadron 31 arrived in Okinawa on June 18, 1945. During July, the PTs carried out several successful air-sea rescue missions and maintained nightly flycatcher patrols to stop evacuation from Okinawa. While on these patrols, they sank a Luger and 6 canoes, all loaded with Japanese troops seeking to escape. And here we have Sailor Mail from Squadron 31. Sailor Mail. Squadron 32 was assigned to the Pacific Fleet, had no action at the Treasury Islands and the Solomons during the period they were there, which was December 44 to February 45. They were then based at Espiritu Santos, New Hebrides, and then moved to Okinawa from September to December of 45, but saw no action at these bases. Squadron 32, Sailor Mail. Motor Torpedo Boat Squadron 33. On September 16th, 1944, carrier-borne fighters made an early sweep over Halmahera, and one of them was shot down. The pilot, Ensign Harold Thompson, of VF-26 was wounded, but parachuted into the water several hundred yards from shore. A Catalina rescue plane dropped a rubber raft, and he managed to get on it, and the raft hit a small unmanned cargo ship 200 yards from shore, and Thompson tied on to that. Unable to land the Catalina, his plight was reported to the USS Oyster Bay. Early in the afternoon, Lieutenant A. Murray Preston, commander of MTB Squadron 33, got underway in PT 489 with PT 363 and set out to rescue Thompson with an all-volunteer crew. 2.5 hours under constant shell fire in broad daylight saw Thompson rescued with no casualties in either PT boat. Preston would be awarded the Medal of Honor, and 3 officers and 1 crewman would be awarded the Navy Cross. And here we have a picture of a map from at close quarters. And you can see where the little arrow shows where that happened. There is sailor mail from Squadron 33. Another one from MTV Ron 33. Arriving in England in May of 44, MTB Ron 34 was the only squadron participating on June 6, 1944 for Operation Neptune, the naval portion of the invasion of Normandy. PTs from MTB Ron 34 in divisions of 3 escorted the minesweepers in advance of the invasion fleet to clear a broad sea lane to the beaches of Normandy. On the morning of June 8th, the destroyer Glennon hit a mine and began to settle by the stern. Destroyer escort Rich, preceded by 2 minesweepers, approached Glennon and was passing a tow line when 2 more mines exploded. The second blew the stern off the Rich. PT 504, joined by PT 502 and 506, made fast to the sinking ship and took off 69 wounded men, 2 sailors from the PT boats, 1 from each 504 and 506, missed the order to abandon the ship and actually rescued 11 more of Rich's crew before they were all picked up. And here you have a picture of PT 504 rescuing survivors from the water. Sailor mail from MTB Ron 34. Penalty size envelope used as sailor mail, again from MTB Ron 34. Squadron 35 joined Operation Neptune on D-Day +1. Lieutenant Commander John Buckley of the MacArthur Rescue fame was aboard PT 510. The MTB Ron was stationed on the Mason Line, located on the western edge of the Utah Assault Area to protect against small German surface craft based out of Cherbourg. In the early morning hours of August 9th, 1944, PT 509 collided with a German minesweeper, and its bow was hung up on the side of the German ship. Only 1 crew member survived. John L. Page became a POW on the island of Jersey. He had 37 wounds, along with a broken right arm and leg. He was liberated on May 8th, 1945. And here you show the wreckage of the PT 509. Here we have a penalty from MTB Ron 35. Motor Torpedo Boat Squadron 36 was assigned to the South Pacific. On October 28, 1945, PTs 523 and 525 were on their way to patrol station on the north side of Leyte in heavy rain. The rain cleared just long enough for 4 Japanese planes to sneak in to bomb and strafe the boats. 8 men aboard PT 523 were killed, 3 officers, 6 men, and an Australian correspondent were wounded. Here we have an election ballot from Squadron 36. And sailor mail from 36. Commissioned in June of 44, MTB Ron 37 was assigned to the Pacific Fleet and had action in the Solomons. They moved base to Espiritu Santo in February of 1945 and moved down to Okinawa in August of 45. MTB Ron 37 didn't see any enemy action while at these bases. Sailor mail Squadron 37. In December of 44, MTB Ron 38 was assigned to the Southwest Pacific, arrived at Samar, Philippines on June of 1945. The squadron based there and at Basilan Island, Philippines, but had no action except for strafing on shore installations at Borneo early in August of 45. Here we have sailor mail from Squadron 38. MTB Ron 39 was assigned to the Pacific Fleet and arrived at Samar, Philippines in July of 45 and was there at the cessation of hostilities. It had no action against the enemy. Sailor mail from MTB Ron 39. MTB Ron 40 was assigned to the Pacific Fleet and arrived in Samar, Philippines in the summer of 45 and was also there at the cessation of hostilities. It saw no action with the enemy. And here we have sailor mail from MTB Ron 40. So in ending, Squadron 41 was in shakedown in Miami when the war ended. It never saw action. MTB Ron 42 was commissioned after the war ended, but was never shipped out. MTB Ron 43 was to be transferred to USSR, but the order was canceled. And MTB Ron 44 and 45 were never commissioned. The 3 PT squadrons operating in the Mediterranean for 2 years lost 4 boats destroyed by mines. They had 5 officers and 19 men killed in action, 7 officers and 28 men wounded in action. They fired 354 torpedoes and sank 38 vessels, totaling 23,700 tons. They damaged another 49, and in joint patrols with the British boats, sank 15 vessels and damaged 17. In the Pacific theater, they didn't keep as detailed a record of tonnage sank, but there were innumerable barges and transports were sunk by PT boats. The PT boats are credited with the sinking of IJN Terutsuki and submarine I-9. They lost 306 officers and men. The victory in the Pacific would not have been possible without the daring of the PT boats. Of the 531 PT boats produced for World War II, 99 were lost in service to various causes, including enemy action, friendly fire, accidents, and being scuttled to prevent capture. And that is the end of my presentation.